5,000 years ago, a warlord named Narmer seized the entire Nile Valley and made a claim that would shape the next 3,000 years of human history, that the king was not just a ruler, but a living god. That idea built the pyramids. It raised armies and crushed empires, and for 30 centuries it held. But the very machinery designed to make the god-king eternal, the priests, the temples, the rituals, slowly became the thing that devoured the throne from within. Around the year 3100 BC, the narrow floodplain of the Nile was a fractured corridor of warring regional chiefdoms. Agricultural wealth was concentrated in Upper Egypt, but security was fleeting, vulnerable to erratic river floods and constant local raids. True stability required a structural revolution. Narmer, the earliest securely recorded ruler of this dawn era, recognized that raw force alone could not hold the river. At the ancient temple of Hierakonpolis, priests deposited a ceremonial siltstone slab, today known as the Narmer palette. This object served as a calculated political broadcast, designed to justify his conquest to both allies and rivals. On one side, Narmer stands tall, wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt, striking a bound captive with a heavy mace. On the reverse, he marches past decapitated enemies, wearing the red crown of Lower Egypt. To cement this unprecedented alliance of the two lands, Narmer forged a new concept of power. He abandoned the role of a tribal chief to become the living embodiment of Horus, the sky god. Scribes carved his name inside a serech, a rectangular frame representing the palace gates, topped by the divine falcon. This sacred marker broadcast a unifying message across the newly forged nation. To challenge the king was to challenge the cosmic order of the universe. While later generations would tell legends of a great founder named Menes, contemporary archaeological evidence confirms Narmer. His physical seals, buried in the royal tombs of el-Kab, alongside early administrative documents, establish him as the historical anchor of the First Dynasty. By fusing administrative control with divine authority, Narmer created the single sacred office that would hold Egypt together. The geography of the Nile Valley was a trap of absolute dependence. Scattered agricultural communities clung to a narrow strip of green, hemmed in on all sides by sterilizing desert. Survival here hung entirely on the erratic pulse of the river. In years of extreme floods, entire mud brick villages washed away. In years of low floods, the soil baked dry, crops failed, and famine took hold. No single village could solve this cycle of crisis on its own. Centralized power grew out of a brutal, practical necessity: the need to manage grain reserves, coordinate massive labor forces to build flood dikes, and distribute food during years of drought. The king of the two lands became the ultimate manager of the river's resources. But managing a kingdom stretching hundreds of miles required immediate, unquestioned obedience. In an era without roads, royal authority had to be instantly recognizable across vast distances. Scribes and tax collectors carried the king's physical seal, bearing the serech and the Horus name, into every remote settlement. To a distant farmer, this emblem was not a decorative symbol. It was the law, backed by the promise of divine protection and the threat of state force. By linking the crown to the gods, early Egypt transformed the daily struggle for survival into a cosmic duty. The king was the absolute anchor of order against chaos. Without him, the Nile would fail and the desert would swallow the fields. This supreme concentration of power solved the immediate problem of survival, but it also forged a system of absolute control that would soon redirect the entire labor of the nation toward a singular, monumental purpose. Around 2667 BC, King Josa took the throne and altered the nature of royal authority. Before his reign, rulers were buried in mud brick tombs that slowly decayed back into the desert. Josa demanded permanence. On the desert plateau of Saqqara, his builders initiated a construction project that changed human architecture forever. The monument began as a traditional flat mastaba tomb. Over years of planning, workers stacked 6 limestone mastabas vertically, creating a 60-meter tall step pyramid. This was the first major stone complex in history, built entirely of durable cut limestone instead of fragile mud. A leap of this scale required more than structural genius. It demanded a massive state apparatus. To quarry, shape, and transport thousands of tons of heavy stone, the crown had to command and support thousands of workers. This project shows the birth of a powerful bureaucracy. Scribes calculated daily rations of bread and beer. Administrators coordinated logistics across regions, and overseers directed seasonal labor forces during the Nile floods. Djoser's monument was the physical proof of this new state power. By converting sacred authority into a permanent mountain of stone, the crown created an institution that outlasted any single reign. Long after the king passed into the afterlife, his pyramid stood on the horizon, a constant reminder of the state's absolute control over the land. This administrative machinery reached its peak in the 4th dynasty on the Giza plateau. Here, the pharaohs Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaure built more than tombs. They engineered a national economy. The 3 colossal pyramids required an unprecedented concentration of wealth, resources, and human effort. Archaeological excavations at the Giza workers' village confirm the builders were not enslaved captives, but free citizens performing seasonal labor. The crown housed, clothed, and fed a rotating force of tens of thousands of skilled craftsmen and laborers. This workforce served as part of a tax-paid corvée system. Huge bakeries produced thousands of loaves of bread daily. Breweries supplied fresh beer, and on-site medical facilities treated injured workers, even performing bone surgeries. By feeding and organizing this massive workforce, the state transformed a construction site into a powerful engine of national unity. Farmers from distant provinces, isolated by geography, came together to work on a single project. Building the king's eternal home became a shared identity. Every stone hauled from the quarries was an act of state service, reinforcing the belief that the pharaoh was the ultimate mediator between heaven and earth. This monumental effort made the king's absolute power concrete in limestone. The sheer scale of the Giza plateau proved that the central government could reach into every village, levying taxes, food, and bodies for the crown. Yet, this coordination came with a hidden danger. Sustaining such massive projects stretched the nation's resources to their limit. The crown was spending vast amounts of grain and treasure to build monuments that produced no economic return. The success of Giza planted the seeds of future financial exhaustion, setting up a quiet crisis that would eventually threaten the stability of the entire kingdom. The Giza plateau drained the treasury. To restore political backing, 5th dynasty kings looked to the sun god, Ra, at Heliopolis. They adopted a new title, the Son of Ra. But this shift carried a hidden cost. By claiming to be the son of a god rather than the living God himself, the pharaoh stepped down from absolute divinity. He now shared the sacred space of power with a rising priesthood. At the same time, the administrative machinery grew too heavy. To run the distant provinces, the crown relied on local governors called nomarchs. Over generations, these positions became hereditary. Instead of serving the king, these provincial elites kept local tax revenues, raised private armies, and carved out lavish tombs in their own home cliffs. They began acting like miniature kings. Then, the environment turned. Around 2200 BC, a catastrophic mega-drought struck the region. The Nile floods failed, crops withered, and starvation swept through the valley. The central treasury, depleted by centuries of monument building, could no longer provide relief. The illusion of the god-king's control over the cosmos shattered. If the pharaoh could not command the rising of the river, his divine mandate was gone. The central government collapsed, fracturing Egypt into warring regional factions. The first intermediate period had begun. For the first time in nearly 1,000 years, the crown could no longer hold the pieces together, and the nation fell into chaos. Around 2060 BC, a line of southern rulers based in Thebes launched a military campaign to reclaim the fractured valley. The decisive push came under Mentuhotep II. By 2055 BC, his forces defeated the northern dynasty at Heracleopolis, bringing the entire length of the Nile back under a single crown. This victory established the Middle Kingdom, an era built on the promise of restoration. Mentuhotep restored the traditional system. He adopted royal titles that declared him the unifier of the two lands, claiming the direct protection of Horus and Ra. Once again, the physical security of the state was bound to the divine body of the pharaoh. Scribes recorded his victories on temple walls at Deir el-Bahari, presenting the king as the sole force capable of preserving cosmic balance. This recovery proved that the sacred office of the pharaoh was resilient enough to survive total institutional breakdown. When a strong ruler reasserted the crown's authority, the fractured provinces submitted, grain began flowing to the central treasury, and trade networks with the Levant reopened. Yet, this restored stability carried a hidden vulnerability. To secure peace, Mentuhotep compromised, allowing provincial governors to keep their local influence in exchange for loyalty. The central government was functional again, but the underlying internal divisions that caused the first collapse were hidden rather than healed. Under the surface of this new golden age, the structural weaknesses remained, waiting for the next moment of royal hesitation to fracture the land once more. Around 1650 BC, the compromised peace of the Middle Kingdom fractured. Foreign rulers from Western Asia, known as the Hyksos, seized the Nile Delta and established their capital at Avaris. Strontium isotope analyses of teeth from cemeteries at Tel el-Dabba confirm a distinct foreign-born elite had taken control of the north. For nearly a century, the native Egyptian kings in southern Thebes ruled as weak vassals, forced to pay humiliating tribute. The reclamation began with Ahmose I. Ascending the Theban throne around 1550 BC, Ahmose abandoned defensive posturing for absolute warfare. He launched a determined campaign to secure the delta, targeting the vital northern gateway fortress of Charu at Tel Habua. Modern excavations at the site reveal thick destruction layers of ash, broken chariots, and scattered weapon fragments, confirming a violent siege rather than a peaceful retreat. Ahmose crushed the Hyksos strongholds, driving the foreign rulers out of Egypt and pursuing them deep into the Levant. This victory reshaped the Egyptian state. To conquer his enemies, Ahmose adopted their own military technology, integrating the composite bow and the high-speed, horse-drawn chariot into his forces. He established Egypt's first professional standing army, supported by state-run metal workshops and systematic logistics. Divine kingship changed forever. The pharaoh ceased to be a quiet mediator of cosmic order. He became an active, armored war leader. Ahmose adopted the triumphant title, "He who establishes the two lands," cementing his authority through battlefield conquest. This shift from defensive restoration to aggressive expansion secured the throne, forging a militarized state that was ready to dominate the ancient world. Around 1479 BC, Thutmose III took command of Egypt's professional standing army and launched a series of expansions that transformed the kingdom into a global superpower. Over his 54-year reign, the pharaoh led 17 military campaigns across the Levant, Syria, and Nubia, pushing Egypt's borders to their absolute limits. His ultimate test came in 1457 BC at the Battle of Megiddo. Rather than taking the safe routes, Thutmose led his army through the narrow, single-file Aruna Pass, catching the rebel Canaanite coalition completely by surprise. After an 8-month siege, the city fell. The pharaoh pressed further, crossing the Euphrates River to challenge the kingdom of Mitanni, while simultaneously driving south into Sudan, to secure the sacred mountain of Napata. Egypt now ruled an empire stretching over 2,000 miles. This vast territory was bound to the crown by a systematic extraction of wealth. Vassal states sent annual shipments of Syrian chariots, Anatolian silver, Nubian gold, and Lebanese cedar. Scribes recorded these riches as sacred tribute. On the sandstone walls of Karnak Temple, the annals of Thutmose III detailed every campaign, showing the king presenting captive princes and massive spoils directly to the chief god, Amun-Re. With these conquests, pharaonic authority found a new basis in military prestige. The king was no longer merely the quiet caretaker of the Nile's fields. He was a universal conqueror whose battlefield victories proved his divine favor. By capturing foreign lands, Thutmose expanded the sacred order of Maat, demonstrating that his crown could enforce cosmic order far beyond the borders of Egypt. The larger the empire grew, the more the pharaoh relied on these grand temple monuments to prove his conquests were sanctioned by heaven. The wealth of this vast empire materialized in the colossal sandstone walls of Karnak and Luxor. In Thebes, the temple complex of Amun-Re grew into a city within a city, functioning as the architectural grammar of imperial dominance. Here, the pharaohs did not merely build sanctuaries, they constructed massive stone stages to showcase their divine right to rule. At Karnak, the great hypostyle hall became a physical forest of stone. 134 colossal columns, some rising over 20 meters high, mirrored the primeval marsh of creation, suggesting that the king's rule was anchored in the very origin of the universe. Along the exterior walls, massive relief carvings depicted the pharaoh striking down foreign enemies and binding captives. This was not private devotion. These temples were towering political broadcasts, open to foreign emissaries, visiting vassals, and the public during grand state festivals. During the annual Opet festival, the statues of Amun, Mut, and Khonsu were carried in sacred barges from Karnak to Luxor Temple. The pharaoh walked at the head of this grand procession, surrounded by soldiers, priests, and musicians. By publicly merging his own identity with Amun-Re, the king demonstrated that his authority was absolute and divinely ordained. This architecture of scale projected a message of absolute permanence over a diverse, multi-ethnic empire. To a captive Nubian or Assyrian merchant, the towering pylons and obelisks made one thing clear: the power of Egypt's king was as unshakable as the stone itself. Yet, this massive religious performance required an equally massive priesthood. As the temples grew, so did the wealth of the priests of Amun, establishing a rival power base that would soon challenge the crown itself. In 1353 BC, Amenhotep IV ascended the throne and chose to dismantle the entire foundation of Egyptian society. He changed his name to Akhenaten, abandoned the capital at Thebes, and declared that the traditional gods of Egypt no longer existed. In their place, he installed a single deity, the Aten, the physical disk of the sun. This change was an economic assault as much as a spiritual one. For centuries, Egypt's stability rested on a complex network of temples that collected grain, managed land, and distributed wealth. Akhenaten severed these ties. He ordered the closure of traditional temples, seized their vast estates, and redirected their revenues to the royal treasury. The powerful priesthood of Amun was stripped of its wealth and authority overnight. On a barren stretch of the desert, at a site now called Amarna, the king built a new capital from scratch. Here, the traditional stone roofs of temples were left open to the sky, forcing priests to worship under the blazing direct rays of the sun. Artistic styles warped. Reliefs no longer depicted the pharaoh as an idealized, muscular warrior, but with elongated skulls, swollen bellies, and spindly limbs. By centering the entire cosmos solely on his personal relationship with the Aten, Akhenaten made the crown the only gateway to the divine. But by breaking the ancient system, he pushed the state to the brink of collapse. Outside the capital, the empire's administrative and diplomatic networks began to decay. The experiment died with its creator. When Akhenaten passed away, he left behind a fractured kingdom. His successor, a young boy named Tutankhaten, faced an immediate crisis of legitimacy. To save the monarchy, the young king changed his name to Tutankhamun, abandoned the desert capital of Amarna, and issued the Restoration Stela. He systematically rebuilt the desecrated temples, reinstated the traditional priesthoods, and welcomed the old gods back into the state pantheon. This rapid reversal was an act of survival. The crown had discovered that without the ancient shared religious order, the god-king could not rule. By restoring the old gods, the pharaohs bought immediate political survival, but they paid for it with the long-term wealth of the crown. Over the next 2 centuries of the Ramesside period, the temple of Amun-Re at Thebes transformed from a national sanctuary into a sovereign economic empire. Every military victory by New Kingdom warrior kings brought fresh land, captives, and gold directly into the temple's coffers. Tax records and land donation stelae reveal that the priesthood eventually controlled more than 30% of Egypt's arable land, hundreds of ships, and a vast share of the nation's grain surplus. This grew into a parallel treasury and a massive political machine. The high priest of Amun functioned as a rival sovereign, operating with an independent bureaucracy, private estates, and his own tax collectors. Wealth and land gave the priesthood power that even the king could not ignore, while the pharaoh remained the visible head of state, performing sacred rituals and leading armies. His actual domestic control grew increasingly thin. The crown was being emptied out from the inside rather than smashed from the outside. The palace spent its resources to maintain the illusion of absolute authority, while the temple quietly held the actual keys to the national economy. By the end of the 20th dynasty, this structural imbalance reached a breaking point. During the reign of Ramesses XI, the central government could no longer pay its own administrative workforce, leading to the first recorded labor strikes in history. The high priest Herihor bypassed the throne entirely, claiming military command and civil authority in the south, while the king ruled weakly in the north. This internal breakdown fed directly into the Third Intermediate Period, fracturing the unified state that Narmer had forged. The old idea of a sacred monarchy survived, but it no longer governed with full force, leaving a divided Egypt vulnerable to the foreign empires rising on its horizons. By 664 BC, Egypt slipped into an age where survival replaced conquest as the state's primary drive. The Nile, once the reliable heartbeat of the nation, grew erratic. Around 300 BC, a series of massive volcanic eruptions altered global weather patterns, triggering repeated failures of the summer floods. As the dry earth cracked and harvests failed, the economic strength of the crown weakened, opening the door for hungry empires watchfully waiting at the borders. In 525 BC, the Achaemenid Persians marched across the Sinai. They overthrew the native rulers and established the 27th dynasty, yet the Persian kings did not dismantle the pharaonic system. Instead, they carved their own names inside the sacred cartouches, adopting the traditional titles of the living Horus. When Alexander the Great took the country in 332 BC, he traveled to the desert oracle of Siwa to be declared the literal son of Amun. His successors, the Ptolemaic dynasty, built grand temples at Edfu and Philae, depicting themselves in traditional kilts, double crowns, and false beards. This use of ancient ritual language revealed a stark reality. The conquerors realized they could not govern the Nile without the sacred machinery of the god-king. To the local farmers, the taxes they paid still fed the temples that kept cosmic order. But this preservation came at a cost. The old pharaonic system became a political mask worn by foreign rulers to prevent rebellion. The final act of this 3,000-year system unfolded under Cleopatra VII. Seeking to preserve her kingdom's independence, she presented herself as the living goddess Isis. Her diplomatic efforts ultimately failed. Following her death in 30 BC, Rome annexed the land, transforming the valley into the personal granary of the emperor. While Roman rulers still carved their likenesses on temple walls, the living god king who bound heaven and earth was gone, ending the longest continuous political theology in human history. The suicide of Cleopatra. The 7th, in 30 BC, ended a lineage of rulers that stretched back to Narmer. With her death, the crown of Upper and Lower Egypt was broken, and the land was reduced to a province of the Roman Empire. Octavian's legions secured the cities, and tax collectors diverted the grain of the Nile to Rome. The office of the divine king, which had survived floods, droughts, invasions, and religious civil war, disappeared forever. Yet, the civilization itself did not die with its kings. The farmers continued to till the black soil, the priests quietly maintained local rituals, and the scribes kept the ancient language alive, which would survive for centuries in the form of Coptic. Though the temples eventually fell silent and the shifting sands buried the stone monuments, the memory of this old world persisted through ruins and texts, waiting for rediscovery. In the modern era, that rediscovery is an ongoing process. Recent archaeological work continues to rewrite the timeline of this ancient state. In 2025 and 2026, the missing pharaoh investigation at Saqqara uncovered a previously unknown burial chamber containing a royal name absent from all surviving king lists. At the same time, high-resolution paleoclimate data from ancient Nile sediments is revealing how environmental changes directly altered the construction schedules of the earliest pyramids. These new finds show that the story of this civilization is not static, locked away in glass cases. Every excavation brings new evidence that changes how we view the relation between divine power, economic control, and the natural world. The colossal monuments still stand on the desert horizon, preserving the memory of a system of belief that held a nation together. Though the system of the God King proved mortal, the civilization itself endured. Egypt did not vanish, only the pharaohs did. Today, the colossal monuments of the Nile stand in silence, their gods long gone. Yet the dream of the pharaoh, that one absolute ruler can conquer chaos and guarantee stability, never truly died. We still look to powerful leaders to shield us from uncertainty. The divine monarchy is gone, but our hunger for order remains. What kind of gods do we build today? Join the conversation in the comments below.